this beautiful day. How is everyone enjoying groups? Everybody in here a part of life groups? Is it awesome? That's so good. I love to hear that. Love to hear that. I've heard already great reports. I know Sister Prizer has said hers is amazing, which it always is. It's just so good to hear all of the reports. I know they had an incredible time in marriage. What's the title? On the Rock? Marriage on the Rock, not on the rocks. Marriage on the Rock. I like that. They said they had an incredible one the other night, and the Spirit of God fell, and so good. All right, well, this morning we have talked different components since we're in that season of our church. We've talked about several different components of evangelism and missional living. One of those is spiritual conversations, and one of those is how we do that. But today we're going to put it all together. The Dillingham group, Mobilized Church Network, has worked on a new graphic that is going to explain spiritual conversations, kind of the flow of how it goes. So it's not just have a spiritual conversation, ask questions. Here's why. Here's what you're going to know about the whole flow of it. So we're really excited about this new graphic together and how it explains everything. So from that, I think we have that graphic. We're going to put that graphic on the screen, and we are going to get started here in just a second.
We have a malfunction.
Cup lid. Don't you love those lids? No, a hole in the bottom.
It's coming out the bottom.
Even our coffee cups are holy around here.
Hallelujah.
If you're watching in the foyer, we have an emergency. We need a cup brought up quickly. All right, so we're going to get started.
They say, help me, Lord.
Problem solver back here.
Oh,
Praise
look,
the
look,
Lord.
Come on, he
man.
jumped up.
Let's go.
No, he did. Help me, Lord, I leak. That's why you need to keep getting filled up with the Lord. Okay, what did you just say?
Okay, so we've been talking over.
Thank you.
I won't start over.
Thank you.
So we're getting started with the graphic. They're going to put the graphic on the screen, and we're going to start talking about the spiritual conversations flow and how it's not just have a spiritual conversation, just ask questions, but there's a process, and here's why. And so today.
Yeah, that's so. It's funny because in a lot of the coaching that we do, we realize that there's a lot of times that we say to people that you just do this, and they're like, oh, well, I didn't realize that, and you're like, we've gone over that like 20 times in coaching, or like, oh, I didn't understand that, or have we talked about that, or whatever.
Well, and how many of you out here, I know how I am, but how many of you have to see, I mean, you can pull out a piece, but you have to see, what are we doing? Where are we going here? So that could be part of it.
So I think, yeah, exactly. I think that's the thing where, like, as we talk about, like, for example, we've talked about asking questions, the importance of asking questions. Well, it's like, well, I mean, questions, what do you mean by that? Like, what, asking questions? What? So this kind of gives you an ability to look at the entire process of a spiritual conversation and see it in a composite view. And then also important to understand that sometimes these spiritual conversations happen sometimes they happen in one setting. Yeah. Like sometimes you could have a spiritual conversation where you could walk somebody through, and you could go through the, all to self-diagnosis and determining disciplability. You could go all the way through and one, 30-minute conversation. Sometimes this is 6 weeks. Yeah. Sometimes you just start asking some questions and realize that the person's not super duper open, and maybe they don't trust you, or maybe they're like, I don't want to have one of those conversations. I know what's going to happen. You're going to ask me to be a part of your, your church's multi-level market, whatever. All right, so I think like you just said, sometimes if you see just the little pieces of things or whatever, you're like, okay, how does that fit in? Like, I understand various components of it, but how does that fit into the whole today? I want to let's just start with highlighting some key points. Number one is excuse me, that the ultimate goal of spiritual conversations determine disciplability. I had a conversation just the other day with a brand new pastor that just joined our network. Excuse me. And the pastor, I asked the pastor this question. I said, how many guests have you had in the last 6 months? And he told me. I said, how many of those guests are truly disciplable? He says to me, tell me the definition of a disciple again. And I, okay, the definition of a disciple is somebody who is willing to let Jesus change what they care about, willing to let Jesus change them in every way. That's the fundamental characteristic of a disciple. We talked about that, right? We've talked about. Here's a piece that we've talked about. We've talked about the fact that the definition, the fundamental, and we say definition, but really the definition is really, it really settles in on the fundamental characteristic, because here's why. Because we're talking about what area of disciplability. Because here's the thing, you could talk about somebody who's, like, we could talk about disciplability as it relates to, let's say, for example, trust, right? We could talk about trust, and we could talk about why don't you trust God, and really get through into that type. Or you could talk about disciplability in the area of, like, modesty. And that person may say, look, I want God to change my life, and I want God to change my world, and I want God to change I don't want him to change my wardrobe.
I'm okay with this, but not so okay with that.
See, and that's the thing. That's the thing that I think that we need to understand, is that we all have various areas of our lives that we recognize need. So we're gonna really hit this as we walk through this today. We've all got areas in our lives where we recognize our need for the Lord, or need to adjust our life to match the kingdom way, the Jesus way, what the Bible says. The kingdom way. Well, number one, Jesus reveals it to us by his Spirit. They that worship shall worship in spirit and truth, right? So how do we know the kingdom way? Jesus reveals it to us by Spirit, and he reveals it in truth. And it's recorded in the Word. When Jesus was teaching during his earthly ministry, do you know what he was saying? My kingdom is like. Like, over and over and over. That's what Jesus was saying. This is what my kingdom is like. So, any comments there?
Well, I think it's, I like that you mentioned there are some times when you're having conversations with a person and they may be super open in one area but not open in another area. It's so powerful to realize that discipleship is a lifelong process. And so this concept will apply to any person that you're having conversations with. Any conversation could become a spiritual conversation. And if you look at Jesus, it's the end of his earthly ministry, and the disciples are still fighting over who's going to be greatest in the kingdom. And so I think this kind of process is an ongoing process that will help you as you not just get into these conversations with people, but also as they start to take steps in their faith to move forward toward following Jesus. This is an ongoing thing. And it also, I think, is helpful for me personally, all of us individually, to kind of ask ourselves some of these questions, go through this. It's going to be pretty powerful.
Well, I think it's so cool because back in the back we talked a little bit about intercessory prayer, and I think it's so cool because as you go through this process, there's going to be times when you're disciplable, people are disciplable until they're not. And so you're in the process with somebody and you're going through spiritual conversations and all this, like you just said, and they're like, I don't want Jesus to change that. Well, that's when you go to intercessory prayer. And that's when you say, God, look, we've gotten this far, now what? So you go to prayer and help them see so that they can change what they care about.
That's so good because here's the thing. That's amazingly good because here's the thing. This is the thing that I was thinking about this morning when I was thinking about Lifetalks and whatever. I was thinking about the fact that I didn't really truly understand and appreciate intercessory prayer until I really understood it in a missional context. And I know this, but I thought of intercessory prayer as sort of like a cool dimension of spiritual warfare. Like, I know that sounds terrible.
That's how we talk about it in
it's
our
like,
movement.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, what is intercessory prayer? I'm bringing down the... You know what I'm saying? Like, and I don't mean that. I'm just saying, like, I'm trying
and
to...
And you are, but not in that way.
Right. And I'm trying to talk like in this, like, the mystical, like this mystical voice. And it wasn't until I really started seeing, like bringing people through discipleship, realizing, wow, look at this. They're going gung-ho on, they're like, man, I see that. I see that. That has been an area of my life that's been an area of my life that's held me bound for a long time. And so they're like, yes, they relinquish that over to Jesus. Give that to him. And it's like, it's amazing, right? And then all of a sudden you hit a topic, like say, for example, my first example of this was forgiveness. So we were talking about these areas, like okay, so this is really weird because have you ever had a splinter? Anybody in here ever had a splinter? You ever had a splinter? Okay. All right. I had a splinter the other day, and I didn't realize I had a splinter, but man, I had this stingy, achy feeling right. Actually, I think it was like in here. And it was like right on the soft part of my finger there. And it was it stung and whatever. And so I realized, I'm like, oh man, that's like, what is that? And I thought, I must have I thought it was maybe a pimple thing. It was. And so then I got to looking, and so, but here's the deal. I squeezed it, and some like liquid stuff came out, and all this stuff. Okay, this is what this was like in this person that I started having this discipling conversation with. They were like, yeah, man, I've got this. It's red and it's stuff and whatever. But what happened was when I got down to starting to dig at I realized there was a splinter in there. Yeah. And I started to dig around to get to where that splinter was. And I clipped it with my knife. So I was using a knife.
Yeah, that's smart.
I was using a buck knife, and I had that knife, and I was pulling at it like this, and I clipped the edge of that splinter, and it and it went, and I'm like, yeah, I'm done with that. And set the knife down, and I'm like, we'll just let that sucker work itself out. Well, here's the thing. This person, they recognized that they had a lot of relationship dysfunction, a lot of situations that was coming out in their marriage, and we were talking about that in the area and whatever. Yeah. But I didn't realize that the actual splinter was a real deep familial situation. Yeah. That if they were really going to get over that, there was going to have to be a lot of forgiveness. Mm-hmm. They were going to have to do forgiveness. The splinter was actually that.
So they actually said, no, don't want to go there right now.
When we got to the splinter, and I just mentioned about, what's the Lord dealing with you about? What's God, we're talking about questions. And the person said, well, I had this situation, whatever. And I'm just talking about it. And I said, well, tell me a little bit about that. And we were walking through it. And man, when we hit the splinter, they went zoop and shut down and didn't want to talk about it. I went and they didn't return my texts. They wouldn't return. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty crazy. And I said, Lord, what do I do? And the Lord spoke to me in prayer and said, this is what intercessory prayer is about. He says the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. And you've heard me say this before. 3 of those strongholds all exist in the mind. Casting down imaginations, every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. And I just started going to intercessory prayer. God, I know there's things that exist in his mind. I know there's things that exist in his heart. God, I know that did this and he is, but God, I pray right now in the name of Jesus that you would bring that down, bring the blinders off, let him know, God, that it might be painful to dig that splinter out. But God, in the name of, I didn't pray about the splinter, but I'm just saying, I'm just using it as an example that it gave me a deep, new, profound for intercessory prayer.
And I think that's going to be really important as we go through this, because you're going to get to one spot and then all of a sudden, boom, it's not working, but there's why.
Yeah, like I think you mention that people that are disciplable till they're not. Because
that's all of us. That's everybody.
Yeah.
That's all
because we all reach a point where we're not willing to let Jesus change what we care about in that area. And you keep peeling it back. That's why when you said it's a lifelong experience, which, by the way, is so understand that this is not. See, one of the things that we kind of face a little bit with the Mobilized Church Network, and my brother and I, we've done a lot of district conferences. We're getting ready to go to Maryland, D.C. here in a couple months. And so we've done a lot of this sort of at a district level where the people that came to you, like you're talking to, you were invited and you are going, you're going into these situations and you're talking to leaders and pastors and whatever. And I've had a couple of situations where people have been like, well, I do believe that discipleship is important, but I believe that, I think this focus on discipleship is, we better be careful that it's not a bunch of navel gazing. I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, that we continue to spend more and more time just going deeper and deeper and deeper with Jesus. And what they were saying was they saw evangelism as people with the gospel and bringing new people in, and discipleship as the process of bringing people into spiritual maturity. Yes, and we say the problem with the institutional church over the years is that we've done discipleship like a new converts class. And the idea is, discipleship like a new converts class, then that means you do the new converts class, you get the diploma, you go through the growth track, okay, now you graduated, you're done. Yeah. And what we realize is no, Jesus is never done changing the things in us. And what we realize is that if Jesus said, go into all the world and make disciples of all men, he was speaking of unsaved people. We never find in the New Testament where there's a division between evangelistic efforts over here, like this is missional evangelism, and then this is rooting in discipleship. When Jesus said, go make disciples, what he was saying was, go find people that are open to the message of the better of God's kingdom. Go find people, go declare the kingdom of God, and find people that say, I want that. Lead them into it for the rest of their life until they make it to heaven. That's making disciples. There is no division between evangelistic efforts and rooting and deepening people. It is an effort of helping somebody follow Jesus, let Jesus about all the way through redemption, all the way to full salvation.
How many people can you think of, and I'm sitting here doing this while he's talking, but how many people can you think of that have come to church? Now, I'm talking about before we started all of this. So we've been doing this for some time now, but back in the day, growing up, that they came in, they went through a discipleship class or a Bible study, a 12-week Bible study, because my dad did a bunch of them, and man, it was incredible. But how many people have you seen go through that and you're like, they got it, they're saved, and that's it? And then all of a sudden something happens and you never see them again. And you're like, what happened to those people? They went through our whole life track, or whatever you call your growth track, or whatever you call it. What happened to them? They were in church. But how different is it when you walk with somebody and all of a sudden something happens and they have a crisis of faith, but you're walking with them. And so now that those conversations are easy, walk them through it, they get through it, they go to, and they're still here. It's such a different paradigm, but how important is it to walk with each other and be the body of Christ? So important.
We tell pastors, these are not tweaks to your processes. Implementing incremental change. We tell pastors, this is hard because this is an entire change of operating system. And the crazy thing about it is, because the old operating system this is why we say about attractional churches. Bring all of this together today. Yeah. This is why we talk about attractional model churches. What do attractional model churches do? Attractional model churches, this is their MO. Okay, this is the MO of attractional model churches. Right. Okay, get guests. Yeah. Get them coming back. Experience salvation. Make them members. That's the attractional model. Yeah. So it's get people coming, yeah. Keep people coming, make them members.
That comes from, to be honest, like digging into the weeds a little bit. The King James renders make disciples teach. And the Greek is make disciples. And so I think there's a very much embedded paradigm, not picking on the King, but there's very much an embedded paradigm that says all we have to do is get them in the door, and we're thinking our Western, North American, collegiate style teaching, a professor dispensing information. But what Jesus was saying was, actually go do with other people, you apostles and disciples, what I have done with you. Go replicate the life that I lived with you and among doing life together. Go out and do that. So it's apprenticeship.
And so he did teach. He did teach to them, but the only way he knew how to teach them what they needed to hear was he was with them every day and had relationship with them. So we say teach. Well, he can get up and teach every Wednesday night, but there's no way that he's going to be able to teach something that's applying to every single person at that time. There's no way. And maybe not even for 6 months. Yeah. So you have to have relationship to be able to teach or to walk them through areas of their life that they're going through right then.
It was very much an apprenticeship model. It wasn't, here, I'm going to dispense information, and I'm expecting you to go out and try to do it without having never seen it. Their culture was built around an apprenticeship model. Modeling it. So how teach an apprentice how to make, crafts out of clay?
Or carpenters.
They take the hand of the apprentice and hold their hand as they learn to feel the clay. Yeah. They don't say, here's the % moisture content the clay has to be. We're going to feel it together. And we're going to touch it together. And I'm going to hold your hand as we do it together. And that is exactly how Jesus operated among his disciples.
I have a comment that says, I have felt more used in ministry when I'm walking through life with people than any scenario.
100%.
Being that place where heaven meets earth is life-changing for the disciple and the disciple maker.
100%. 100%. I have felt some of the deepest anointing in my life, not behind a pulpit.
Russellville, Arkansas.
100%. Hundreds of God in a home, in a living room, God giving me words, spontaneous, not feeling the pressure to pull a rabbit out of a hat and preach some general conference sermon that's just, yeah, it's amazing. You know, I have a real list of this recently, just yesterday. We went over to the Rensels, and I interrupted his mowing for a minute. And so anyway, my wife was in talking to Sister Rensel, and I mentioned something to him. We had a gutter bent and water poured over, and it went through. We have like it's not a door, it's like full length windows, and it went through the bottom, and it went all the way underneath our wood laminate floor, and it soaked, and it just swole them up. And so basically we have to replace all of our floor in our basement, and trying to figure out how to fix the door. And so, like, I could watch a YouTube video. I could watch a video of somebody giving me the information. Here is how to do it, right? With no relationship. But I know that Brother Rensel's been in home building. I know Brother Rensel's in a home and know all of those things. I asked Brother Rensel, I said, do I have to replace the door? Or can I cut out, because it's rotted now at the bottom? It's been happening a while. I didn't realize it because I had quarter round over the top of it and didn't realize. And so do I have to cut that bottom out and replace the bottom of that doorway and just retrim it and whatever? And Brother Rensel's like, he's like, do you think it might be time to do an insurance claim? Right? But here's the cool thing. Here was the cool thing. I had a problem. I went to somebody who I believed had better knowledge and expertise in the area than I do. I didn't know. So I went to Brother Rensel. Now, Brother Rensel said, watch this. I could come over, take a look at it, help you figure it out if you'd like. There it is. There it is. I could come over, we could look at it, talk about it, help you figure out what to do. That's that. There it is. That's the thing that we're talking about. That's what you just talked about, was how do we get to a place where we understand that mature believers, because Ephesians 4 says apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers were not given to run church programs and preach amazing.
Not even to do the work of ministry.
That's right. To equip.
To equip the saints for the work of the ministry.
So good. All right, well, can we start on your...
Yeah. Which, I'll tell you something pretty funny. When we first started, there is some stress with this, and there is tension with this, right? And Brother Haltom, I'm going to tell you right now, Brother Haltom, I remember the first thing, Brother Haltom, I'm talking about this, and we're walking through this, and Brother Haltom says to me, but when do you become their pastor? If they're, because
is that step 4.3A or 4.4B? Where's that on the flow chart?
Do you see what I'm talking about? But here's the problem. But here's the problem, guys. Here's the problem. The problem is that it takes massive levels of detox from the old system. This is why we say it takes huge amounts of understanding that this is a whole different operating system. This is not incremental improvements of the old system. This is a brand new, complete system. Yeah. And I think this is important, is that sometimes what we do is we overlay old ways of thinking. So we say, well, in the old model, what you just said, in the old model was we take them through a class, they get done with the class, and listen, wrong, by the way. there's nothing wrong because we have Life Walk, right? There's nothing wrong with knowing those that labor among you. Why do we have Life Walk as a part of saying, okay, you'd like to be involved? Okay, we have to go through Life Walk. Why? Because the corporate church, the corporate body must have a mechanism that the right stuff is being taught and communicated in those organic discipling relationships, right? But the thing was, what eventually I realized what was happening was in those early stages was that Scott was saying to himself that the goal is to make somebody a good, strong member of a church. And what we're saying is, no, that's not what discipleship does. Discipleship is leading someone down the road of transformation in Jesus. If we're walking people down the road of transformation, then the person that's talking to them, the person that's doing the discipling, is not their leader, is not their pastor, they're just a person that's on the journey with them. God is transforming us together. So it's not like at some point has to hand off the person to the pastor and say, okay, I've been pastoring them up to now. Now it's time for you to be their pastor. That we had that conversation. No, that is taking the old system definitions and thinking and putting them into the new operating system and detox. This is why we have to take some of that stuff and crush it up and throw it away so that we can have a whole new way of thinking.
Another another comment. The pressure to find a way into a conversation to invite someone to church is eliminated when you are simply consciously thinking about God. It's so discussed in any conversation if that's what's in our heart. It's the difference between selling sweepers door to door and sharing your story as you move about your day wherever you are. 419 number. Who? Oh, there we go. Sister
Come
Jolie.
on. Blue
Yeah.
shakalaka.
Yeah.
That's the
So true.
thing. That's the thing that we try to do. We try to say to people, look. Okay, here's another detox deal. Evangelism is something I do. I carve out 2 hours on Saturday to go do evangelism. I go pass out tracts or whatever. And look, I'm not dogging. Look, knock doors. If you want to knock doors. You want to find somebody to have a spiritual conversation and you go knock doors in your neighborhood. Okay, I'll help you find a better way than doing that eventually if you'd be happy to learn. But yeah, but here's the deal though. Here's the deal. We don't dog any method. We don't be like, oh no, we don't knock doors. No, I mean, okay, cool. Our goal is let's find somebody to have a spiritual conversation with. Why? Because I'm trying to discover disciplable people. Yeah. That's it. Right? So I love that comment because it says, this isn't something that I carve out time to do. It's who I am. Yeah. If it's a modeling deal, if I'm an electrician and I have an apprentice, I'm not like, oh, I need to carve out a few minutes to apprentice.
I got to print out the PowerPoint that we're supposed to review today.
No, you just say, hey, I'll be by at, hey, I'll be by at 9 to pick you up.
This is especially hard for us as Western thinkers. I think this is so crucial to understand. None of this is trying to create like a new methodology or a tool or a thing. The reason this is so hard is because there's a way the eastern part of the world thinks, and there's a way the western part of the world thinks. And the western part of the world, now it's different currently in our time, but if you think back to the industrialization, everything was systematized. It was about optimization, interchangeability of parts, manufacturing, the rise of technology. Every person has a button to push.
The engine of the Industrial Revolution.
Yes, and that has so affected the way we think.
That's a good point.
That sometimes we don't even realize we're thinking this way.
That's a good point because it overlays into every area of life.
To every area of life, like just everything about it. And so what we're talking about today is really just truthfully getting back Testament ways of thinking. Jesus launched his movement in an Eastern context. They thought about teaching different than we do. They thought about apprenticeship different than we do. They think about systems and processes and all of that. They have such integrated all of life way of thinking. It would have never occurred to the early church that we need to sit down with somebody, create a handout and a PowerPoint, and linearly walk through information. That is the industrialization of education. That is. It's the systemization of education.
Because their how-to process was what I described with Brother Rensel.
Yeah.
Their how-to process wasn't, hey, I sent you a link to a YouTube video. Right. I may, look, I may figure it out. Yeah. YouTube video depends on how much the pressure is on me. Depends on how hungry I am. Depends on maybe how smart I am to be able to figure it out. Yeah. But if I've got somebody who says, okay, I'm going to come do it with you, I'll take a look at it. Sure. What you got going on? Yeah. That's a whole different framework of how to. Yeah. So a YouTube video link is sort of the Western industrial. Well, they get the understanding. We give them there's a seminar. I watched a seminar here. I'm going to send you I'll send you the seminar. Yeah. And yeah, but the thing about it is there's nuances to the situation. There's dynamics to the situation. Brother Rensel may get to my house and say, "Oh, there's no possible way you can salvage this. This is going to be a sieve. Going to ruin your next floor. You do not want to mess with this. I know it's going to be expensive, but and then what happens is now I get put in detention because I'm like, man, I didn't expect all this cost for crying out loud and whatever. And that's what a disciple should experience. Right, Brother Rensel? Like that's what a disciple should experience. Should experience, wait a minute, you're showing me the better way to do it. Like Brother Rensel's like, you could try to fix it the janky way, but it's going to end up in just as bad of a problem, right? Yeah. And so you're telling me I'm going to have to tear this whole thing custom built in the home. Do I have to have it re-custom made? And I don't even know, where do I get it custom made? I don't even know. Do I hire a contractor? And Brother Rensel may say, no, you don't have to do that. They do that at Lowe's now. Right? And I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that they do that. Do you see what I'm saying? Like
and that's just in time.
See the difference between just in time and just in case. And so this is why this is why we're saying, like, Brother Rensel could send me a link to a YouTube video, and I may end up fixing it. I may end up really screwing it up. Because
when I took my dryer apart and I had all these little pieces left over when I put it back together.
Yeah. It's like,
not supposed to do that.
Right.
Here's a couple more comments. We have one that says, this works better because the pastor is only one person. He doesn't have time for 300 or 400 people. That is true. That is true. But pastor's not the only one called. So, yes, it is better because he can't. But so
right.
we're all called.
Would we be okay if you just picked 12?
Yeah, right. No.
Here's another one.
Can't do it that
It says,
way.
I think I figured out. I'm going to try to figure this out, is I tried to be more upstanding on what questions I ask, and I would always fail. You were thinking you had to ask the right question. Yeah. So I just started to be myself.
Yes.
Well, that's scary. No, I'm just joking, because I know who did this. And ask questions of my character, and that's what fit for me instead of being something you're not. So it should flow from you. It should flow from you.
Well, and the funny thing is, Brother Rensel thing, but I mean, I don't really hate to, but it's
discipleship. That's like such a good.
It's the epitome, like it's the epitome. It's but the thing about it is that I was accentuating the Greek there.
We saw that.
but the but the thing about it is though is this is the way Jesus taught too. By the way, this is exactly how Jesus taught, and like the thing about it is Brother Renzel actually asked questions, assess the situation. Do you think? I mean, I'm going to think about some of the questions he asked me. How long have you noticed that the gutter was sagging? Is it sagging because it's old, or do you have a downspout problem? Is there water in it? Maybe gutters weren't made to handle, right, Brother Renzel? Gutters weren't made to handle water filling all the way up to the top of the gutter and just sitting in it for days on end. If you've got a downspout issue, so we're going to have to fix the gutter. Issue was it ran over the top, and he asked me, he says, so where did, other question. He said, is the concrete of your patio from your walkout basement, is it not slanted right? Has the grass grown up too tall? Has the sod
moved? Not slanted.
Think about disciple making. How long have you been feeling?
Right. What we're trying to figure out, like what, golly, that is just so good, because I'm just realizing he asked all kind of questions, which connects with Brother Russell, what you just said about I was trying to ask all the right questions. Well, there's not like a perfect question for Brother Renzel to ask. Like Brother Renzel, I don't know what question to ask.
Which gutter question am I supposed to ask right now?
Well, that's what I was going to say. And a lot of times you
five?
don't, because that's really hard this question thing has been really difficult for me to ask the right question. But that's where you pray and you say, Lord, lead and guide me, because you have Spirit. God has to show you, and he'll give you the right thing to say. Another comment. Lots of great comments. Keep them coming. During Pastor's podcast on Tuesday, he said something that stepped on my toes. He said, they're a person. They are not your next spiritual project. I have been there before with treating a project instead of a person who needs someone to just be a friend and help get them to Jesus.
Man, that's just so true. It's
so good.
And you know what? I'm going to tell you something honest. This is very transparent. As a pastor we built the church off the old traditional model. And there have been times as a pastor that I have experienced compassion fatigue. Has anybody in here ever experienced compassion fatigue in helping and dealing with someone? And you just like, you get another text, you get another phone call, blah, blah, blah just happened. And you're like, I don't know. I wish I had the perfect answer. I don't know. And then what happens is you start to experience compassion fatigue. What happens is when you start living in compassion fatigue, by the way, just FYI, when you start living in compassion fatigue, what happens is people then become projects, because you only have time and emotional bandwidth just to spit out prescriptive, like, here's my prescriptive answers. Do this, do this. Prescriptive versus descriptive, which was, I think, the topic a little bit on Tuesday, wasn't it? Did anybody listen to the podcast on Tuesday? We talked about prescriptive versus descriptive and so on and so forth. So anyway, I just think that is huge. That is very huge. And comments? Any thoughts?
No, I think it's I think that's what the New Testament model does, is when everybody gets involved in the mission, we can increase our effectiveness because we can spend more time with fewer people. And that's how he spent the most time with the most disciplable. Mm-hmm. And of the most disciplable, he spent more time with the even more disciplable.
It's true. The 3 of the 12.
And I think that what Jesus was showing us was a model that can work for us as humans. Jesus never asked to operate outside of the parameters of what it means to be human. Only God can do that. We can only operate within the space that we have, with the resources we have. And God ultimately makes up the difference. But we only have so much time.
Right. Time, knowledge, energy, yeah, experience. Yeah.
And so instead of trying to save 1,000, what if you could minister to 3 that would go on to minister to 3 that would go on to minister to 3? Well, then you're into the 20,000s.
You know, I was sitting here, and this is the beautiful thing about, this is actually the beautiful thing about conversations, is because of the fact that when I sat here and I made that statement about compassion fatigue, and I've been there before, and then I sat here and my first thought was, well, now you need to answer. Like, what's the answer to that then? Answer to compassion fatigue, which you just answered, which is many hands make light work, right? It's hard by the yard, it's a cinch by the inch. If we're living in such a way where, if we're living in such a way where everybody is, this is why the Bible said submit to one another. In a we got to submit to one another. In a discipling community, okay, I don't even want to use the word discipling community. In a kingdom community. In a kingdom community, we have to submit ourselves one to another. So there's three dimensions of submission in God's kingdom. There's a submission to Christ. There's a submission to the spiritual governance authority in your life, those that have the rule over you, right? And there's a submission to one another. There's 3 dimensions in God's kingdom. There's 3 dimensions of submission. And very much towards, look, I'll submit to Jesus Christ. I'll submit to pastor if he's on his ball game. I'll submit to others if I have to.
Yeah. Only the really good ones.
Right. Right. And so, but the reality is I submit to the entire congregation every time I get up and preach. That's the way I exercise my authority. Okay, all right.
That's a goodie.
We need to write that down because submission is amazing. Okay, I'm going to read one more comment and then we have to be done. But it says, having people to do life with has been vital to my growth. Being immersed in the body has meant the difference between life and death for me. This comment, that's literal. It has taught me how to do the same with other people. I can hold crisis because someone held mine.
Yes.
Isn't that
yes.
awesome?
See, the goal, here's the deal. The goal is for Brother Rensel not to fix my problem. The goal is for Brother Rensel to lead me into a place that I can know what to do. And when I come up against something I don't know what to do, I can go back to Brother Rensel. And
when the gutter's sagging on my house.
That's what I'm saying.
Call you.
That's what I'm saying. Then it goes. So this is why we say make disciples who make disciples who make disciples. That's why, like Brother Haltom said, the disciples, as I've modeled the kingdom in life on life with you, you model the kingdom life on life with others so that they can model the kingdom life on life with others. And by the way, I told somebody the other day, we were talking about Bible studies, and I said, dude, there's no study then you sit down with a person and that person says, the person says, oh, I got this splinter, and you kind of pop it and it gets some relief because the pressure and the whatever builds up, and you kind of pop it and you get a little bit of relief, and they're like, I'm good. And then all of a sudden it starts, and then you got another, whatever. And then you get to this point, like it's a forgiveness issue, and you realize, oh, that's a forgiveness issue. Here's what you do. You say, well, why don't we go to the Word? What's the Bible say about forgiveness? Let's see what the Bible talks about forgiveness, about its importance, how we should view it, about how it frees us, the liberty that comes through forgiveness. Let's see what the Word says. See, this is the thing. This is why disciple makers do not become miniature pastors. Right. Disciple makers become journey guides. Yeah. I've been down this stretch of road before.
Let's walk the road together.
I can help you fix your sagging gutter. I can help you forget. Look, I've got a foundation problem. I got water running into my basement. What's my problem? I have a leaky. No, you have a gutter. What? Yeah, let me just tell you. Let me just tell you. Let me tell you what happened to me. And then you introduce the kingdom better and say, look, I know this is hard. When Brother Rensel came to my house and told me, you're going to have to replace the whole doorway, I realized what it was going to cost me. I didn't know if I wanted to pay that. But then I also knew I didn't want to have to be replacing another floor I'm going to fix the problem. I'm going to go with LVT. Brother Rensel says, yeah, you could go with LVT. Yesterday, you could go with LVT, sure. It's impervious to water. I mean, some of it could get underneath it, but the reality is, if it's coming from underneath from that door, you'll have water under your LVT. Oh, it won't ruin your floor, but you'll have black mold growing in your basement. What he said. And I'm like, okay, let's knock the door out. It gave me motivation. Dude, I feel the Holy Ghost right now. It gave me motivation to tackle the hard stuff. Because I don't want to get in this mess again. It gave me the motivation to tackle the hard stuff. And this is the deal. When you're able to ask questions, figure out what the problem is, share your story, and say, look, I know it's hard. I didn't want to knock out the door, but here's the deal. I didn't want to have black mold growing in my basement either and not know about it. At least now, I only knew that I had this problem was because I saw the lamp swelling. Ooh, I got a problem here. What's going on? And so I cut it and pulled it back and went, oh, snap. I got 8 feet of water under my floor in my basement, sitting on the concrete slab or the concrete floor. Anyway, my point is, you highlight the kingdom concepts. Look, here's how Jesus has given us a way. Jesus has given us a better way. Well, I don't know if I want to do all that. I don't know if I want to go that far. I don't know if I want to. Okay. Just learn to enjoy black mold. Just learn to enjoy water problems. And if you've got a relationship with somebody, here's the deal. I can get up here and I could preach and I could say, and David didn't deal with something in his life when Bathsheba was up on that porch balcony of the home, terrace balcony of that home. He saw her, and because he didn't get rid of something in his heart, it created another problem in the twilight years of his ministry when he should have been enjoying. Judgment started coming to his home. Now, what's he now? You don't know my situation. I'm not devaluing the power of the pulpit. But what I'm saying is there's a whole different scenario. There's a whole different situation than when somebody comes and says, here, let's look at this together. Oh, do you see that? And they put their finger like this and go, look, that's like mush, bro. And I'm like, oh, golly. Do you see it? Yeah. Oh, I do see it. What should I do? You're going to have to replace the door. I need to replace the door. I don't want to replace the door. I know it's tough. That's disciple making. That's it right there. And, oh man, that's it. And I can't go to every person. I can't go and poke my finger in every situation. I can't. And so that's why we have to become a culture where we're able to do this together. So we didn't really get through that. Okay.
All right. Great. Keep those comments coming. They've been so very good today. As you think about it throughout the week, just send us a comment. Go be a disciple maker. Find a few. You don't have to find hundreds. Find a few. You do your part, and it'll multiply. That's it. So good. All right, it's 10:40 minutes late, so go get your kids. Grab a donut. I'm sure they're great today. The coffee is delicious because I've already had a cup, and it's so good. So go grab some coffee, and we'll see you back in here.